Okay. Oh, I can't hear you. Uh-oh.
How about now? It would probably help if I
Okay.
unmuted my
Oh,
microphone.
there we go. Okay.
Okay, hi. Hi. All right, it is definitely my first stream back, um, uh, for a while, so thanks everybody for hanging in there with me. Yeah, my name is Elena, aka Bella Beluga, and I am joined today by Maighdlin Kelly. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello. My name is Maighdlin Kelly. I'm an astrologer. I go by they, them pronouns. I am a trans agender lesbian. I really like space. And I'm here to teach you about some space stuff. Combining some astronomy and astrology, it'll be fun.
Right, like how they started out, maybe how they were originally meant to be. I mean, right? Like, I definitely
They
have
have
some
the same
thoughts about
origin.
right, I was gonna say, I definitely have some thoughts about the like split. But so this is one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on is because like I want people to come talk about stuff that like I don't know about. Like, people get to hear me talking all the time about, all this stuff that I think about and whatever, but it's like, I want people to get more perspectives than that, especially astrologically.
Mhm.
And I really don't know that much about the astronomy behind astrology, to be perfectly honest with you. So it's not something I am qualified to talk about. But you are like the most passionate person that I know about like declination and out of bounds stuff. And like, I love following the like Wednesday, like UFO stuff that you do. And like, you just clearly have this like deep passion for space that like I definitely feel very emotional about space. Like when I'm outside and when I think about it, like I get that like
Mhm.
big rushing feeling. And so like I'm really excited to talk to you today like about this mutual love kind of that we have and to learn more,
Mhm.
like,
Yeah, and astronomy isn't really taught in school, really. It
right.
was always like at the end of the textbook that we would never get to in every single year. So, like, it's not your fault that people don't know astronomy all that much because you kind of have to just go find it on your own. That's
Yeah.
just my life.
Well, I
So, I
mean,
wish
I'm
it was
glad that
taught
like
more.
yeah, but I mean, I'm glad that you've like taken it upon yourself to like learn all of this and that like you're so, generous with sharing it.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I guess so like how did you get started with like declination and like out of bounds stuff? Like where did this start for you?
I want to say it was like
Mhm.
2017-ish, something like that. I had been studying astrology for a while. But who was it that was first taught? It was probably Stephen Forrest or Tony Howard that I first got
Mm.
introduced to it. And I just remember reading about out of bounds planets, and it was the first time that I felt like really, really seen astrologically.
Mm.
Like my existence like actually fit in a way that was just like whoa kind of
Yeah.
thing. Because like everyone, when you study astrology long enough, you'll get to the point where it's just like so freaking real, and it was like out of bounds in declination that really did it for me. So yeah, I just tried to like find as much as I could and quickly realized that everything about out of balance planets in astrology, like all of this information is kind of fragmented and scattered and really difficult to
Mm,
find.
right.
So I have just kind of taken it upon myself to try to find all of the resources I could and put it into one spot, which is on my website, pinned to weirdastrology.com. There's like 35 different sources for further learning. And I update
Wow.
that all the time. So, mhm.
Well, like, thank you so much for. Well, I was gonna say, I mean, let me just go ahead and let her rip. You've got an awesome
All
presentation
right.
like planned, so please proceed.
Okay, so I'll just pop over to this screen so everyone can see the slides and everything's good.
Yep, I've got you on there. I've got the slides on there. We are all good to go.
Okay, hello and welcome to Introduction to Declination and Out of Bounds Planets. I am your astrologer today, Maighdlin Kelly. Yeah, so let's get to it. So this is gonna be like a three-part sort of deal where first we're gonna spend some time on like the astronomical foundation for where all this stuff is coming from anyway. And then we'll look at like each planet that does go out of bounds, what that is like, and a chart example or two for each of them.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna look at Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, and Pluto. And then after that, we could just do like open discussion where if you want to share your chart, talk about your own experiences, feel free to do that. I will show you how to look this up. Yeah. So,
Great.
why learn about this at all? Well, it sounds very complicated, but it's actually quite easy to use and to start using right away because, like, all you really need to do to get started is like find a particular number. And that's kind of it. You can definitely go a lot further and get more complicated into like timing techniques and things like that, but that's beyond the scope of today, so we're not going to worry about that. So, it's very useful for identifying cyclical periods of instability and intensity, which is just kind of a thing that happens. Sometimes things make sense, sometimes they don't. It's just part of life. And,
True.
out of bounds planets kind of have this like chaotic neutral sort of influence sort of deal. So when you like are able to like recognize that, it's a lot easier to give space for these exceptional weirdo experiences that don't necessarily fit the norm. So this can also give you some tremendous extra precision and nuance to delineating and forecasting, but also there's so much room for further research
Mm.
because there's not a lot out there, and it's kind of hard to find. So like there's not a whole lot done for out of bounds asteroids, for example. So there's
Mm-hmm.
just like there's so much that people can do with that. I know of like one person who has written about out of bounds asteroids, but I have never been able to find any of her work. So it seems like
Oh wow.
there has been people who have done stuff with declination in like the 90s-ish, but it seems like a lot of that just didn't get onto the internet, and there's a whole new generation of
Mm.
astrologers who just like that they're just not able to like find it. So like one of
Yeah.
the books that I have, I've never found a physical copy like ever. I found it on Scribd or Scribed and then just like had to download it and just like read it online. It's so far hard to find.
That's
But like
wild.
because of that, everyone who like has out of bounds planets share your like stories with the world. You get to like be
Yeah.
a part of everyone's future learning with this. So my goal for this presentation is to hopefully get at least one of you excited enough to go do your own research so I can read about it and so that it just like adds to the body of knowledge for astrologers because it's really fun. Yeah. So
Yeah.
let's begin with the most important planet. It is the Earth. So, the Earth is the foundation for the houses that we get in one's chart because it's coming from its rotation on its axis. There's something else about this axis of the Earth's in that it's tilted a little bit. by about 23 degrees and 26 minutes. So that gives us seasons. Um, and so like when the Earth is tilted toward the sun, we get summer, and when it's tilted away, we get winter. So this tilt of the Earth on its axis is the same thing that gives us longer days in the summer and longer nights in the winter. And it's also why the sun appears to go across the sky much higher in the summer and then much lower in the winter. So it's all coming from that tilt.
Mm.
And humans have been very aware of this for a very, very, very long time. We've been honestly pretty obsessed with it. Because if the Earth didn't have this tilt, we wouldn't have any seasons. There would be no Wheel of the Year, and we wouldn't get the tropical zodiac either.
Mm.
So it's hugely important. It's like so foundational, but just not really talked about all of that much. But anyways, so humans and astrologers have been aware of this for a very long time. Techniques like using Antisha, for example, that's been used for many, many, many years. What
Mm.
is new is identifying and delineating planets that are like beyond that limit of 26 degrees, 26 minutes of declination. So we're going to learn how to identify that, what it looks like, and then what it all means. So, solar declination through history. So, declination is basically just like the measurement of a celestial body from the celestial equator, and I will show you images of this. So like humans have been completely fascinated by the Earth's axial tilt for literally thousands of years. So places like Newgrange in Ireland, pyramids of Giza, Machu Picchu, all of these were made essentially to celebrate the solstices or the equinox, because each of these has like a particular thing where on a very specific date, light will like enter a certain chamber and illuminate like a specific thing. So like for Machu Picchu, I'm pretty sure it's like on the equinoxes, and then Newgrange is for the solstices. So if the
Wow.
Earth was not tilted on its axis, none of this would ever have been made at all because the like with no tilt we'd have the exact same amount of daylight every single day just forever. So there would
Mm-hmm.
be no fluctuation with the seasons. There would be no days where there's a lot more light or a lot less light.
Mm-hmm.
It would be equal daylight all the time. So without the tilt of the axis, we would not have any of these great sights. We wouldn't have the tropical zodiac, the Wheel of the Year, none of it. It would be very boring. So this is what astrologers are usually doing. You're usually measuring along the ecliptic. So the ecliptic is the sun's path throughout the sky, aka Earth's orbit around the sun. So the geocentric perspective, when you're on Earth, it looks like the sun is doing the moving, but it's actually the Earth going around. So with astrology and astronomy, there's kind of some like dimensional shifting going on with like perspective and being able to um, keep a whole bunch of different moving parts in your mind at once, kind of thing. So when astrologers are saying that they have something at like 0 degrees Aries or 15 degrees Cancer, that is all a measurement along the ecliptic. So on this graph here, it's going to be this line here, this tilted line. So when we have the sun up here, we got the summer solstice. Down here, the winter solstice. And this is where all of the like degrees of the zodiac are basically that you're used to. So when someone says, "What do you do as an astrologer?" you say, "I measure along the ecliptic," because that is like literally what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So, the distance from the ecliptic is known as latitude. So that is used in astrology, but not really all that common. So, what I'm going to teach you to do now is to measure from the celestial equator, which is this line here. Now, the celestial equator is basically just the Earth's equator extended out to space. Now, if you've ever looked at a map, you are already somewhat familiar with this, because if you just extend the Earth's equator out to space, you have the celestial equator. North or south of that, like latitude, is called declination. and the distance along it is called right ascension. So we're not really going to be talking about right ascension today. We're going to be talking about declination, the measurement of a celestial body from not the ecliptic, but the celestial equator. So, this angular distance here represents the tilt of Earth's axis. So, there's a difference of 23 degrees and 26 minutes at the solstices. But on the equinoxes, the sun is going to be found like right on the celestial equator, and that's when we have the days of equal daylight. So don't worry, there's more visuals. So the next few screenshots are all from a program called Stellarium, which is free, and I highly recommend it because it's
It's
super useful.
amazing. Yeah.
It is so fun. You can see the sky from like any time, date. There's ephemerides in there. There's so many tools. It's very useful. So here we're looking at the sky on the spring equinox. So we can see this E for east, W for west, of course. This line here going between the two is the celestial equator. So Earth's equator just extended out to space. Now, on the spring equinox, the sun is going to be going through the sky right on the celestial equator. So its declination is always going to be 0 degrees on the spring equinox or on the fall equinox. Now, if we fast forward a couple months to the summer solstice, now the sun is up here. So it is now not at 0 degrees declination, but it's at its maximum distance from the celestial equator, 23 degrees, 26 minutes north of it. So this is where the sun will be declination-wise every summer solstice. And then we fast forward to the equinox, the sun is back at 0 degrees declination. And then fast forwarding to the winter, the sun is now at its maximum distance south of the celestial equator, another 23 degrees, 26 minutes south of that 0 point. So the sun is basically going to be only ever going through the sky at this particular limit. Now, if you were to take a picture of the sun in the sky every day for a year and not bother with daylight savings time, you would get this, which is called an analemma. Now, this is important because this is like literally what the tropical zodiac looks like. So these are from Wikipedia. There's lots of pictures of analemmas on Google. There's also different shapes of analemmas, like depending on what planet you're on too. So this
Oh,
is what
wow.
it looks like from Earth. Yeah, it's so nifty. It's so nifty. I love this stuff so much. So this is literally what the tropical zodiac looks like. So when the sun is up here, you've got the summer solstice. When it's all the way down here, we've got the winter solstice. And then the middle is when we have the equinoxes. So every single year, the sun is never going to go higher than this limit that it gets to at the summer solstice, and it's never going to go lower than this limit here. But sometimes other planets do, and when they do, they get super weird, and we will get to that. So here is a declination graph from Kepler, a astrology program. It's not an app, it's one of the bigger, fancier programs. So we can see here the sun's declination through the course of a year. So for 2022 in January, the sun's declination was towards its maximum, about 23. And then moving along through to the spring equinox, the sun is now at 0 degrees declination, aka 0 degrees Aries. And then moving through the summer solstice, it's at its maximum declination north of the celestial equator, aka 0 degrees Cancer of the tropical zodiac. And then we've got another equinox and then the solstice. So this is what the sun is going to be doing every year. So this is actually where Antisha comes from. So Antisha is basically just equal daylight points. So you can see the top of this arc is 0 degrees Cancer. So when we have like 29 degrees Gemini and 1 degree Cancer, they are equal distance from this solstice point, therefore have the same daylight. And then you can say the same for Taurus, Leo, Aries, Virgo, so on and so forth. So that's where this comes from. So astrologers have been using declination for a very, very long time, just not necessarily in the context of out of bounds planets. These numbers here, you don't have to like memorize this at all, but it's just to show you that the solstice signs are all gonna have relatively like high declination of between 20 to 23-ish, and then the signs that we get around the equinoxes are gonna be just like pretty much on near the celestial equator. So, uh, the nucleus of life is what Lee Weston refers to as this limit in the sky by declination of 23 degrees, 26 minutes south to north. So, the Earth's tilt towards or away from the sun gives us the seasons and the tropical zodiac. The moon, container of life astrologically, is actually keeping Earth's axial tilt stable enough for life to exist. So this Earth-Sun-Moon relationship is super important and kind of shows you like where the big three comes from, like the sun, moon, and rising, and why that is so central.
Mm.
Because it just like keeps it's like the foundation for life, essentially. So in a book called Beyond the Solstice by Declination, which is I've never found a physical copy of, but it does exist. Lee Weston refers to this declination limit in the sky as the nucleus of life, aka the realm of normalcy and stability, because that's where the sun is going to be all the time. So, the maximum ecliptic limit, aka Earth's obliquity, is currently 23 degrees, 26 minutes of arc. So anything that has a declination more than that is out of bounds. So, one important technicality for those of you who may be really interested to look into out of bounds planets in charts prior to like 1900, because the axial tilt of the Earth fluctuates very, like just a little bit over like 40,000 years. Technically, something in a chart from like 1900 won't be out of bounds until it's at 2328 because the ecliptic limit is 2327. And then, like in the year 2100, the max ecliptic limit will only be 2325. So then anything at 2326 will be out of bounds. But, like, for all intents and purposes, right now, this is just like I had to make sure that this technicality was addressed.
Sure.
um, but like for any chart that we're going to be looking at for the most part, the limit is 2326. So if it's at 2327, it is out of bounds. Just so you know. So here's that same graph again where we saw the sun's declination. And this one is also including Mars as well. So this gray area here is anything beyond the sun's max ecliptic limit of 23 degrees, 26 minutes. So the sun is never ever going beyond that, but sometimes other planets do. And this shows us the year 2022, and we can see that Mars, its declination is a little wonkier. So Mars is going into this gray area once in January, February, and then again starting in October through November and December. So this means in the beginning of the year, Mars was out of bounds for about 2 months, and then it's going to go out of bounds again starting in October. So this is what it looks like from a graphical perspective. So each planet has its own rhythm for how often it does go out of bounds. Some of them don't at all. Like Saturn, for example, never does. This is showing you the seven traditional planets except for the moon, because if I added the moon here, because it would just be pure chaos. So don't worry about that right now. But you can see that like Mercury, for example, goes out like once here in July, and then again at the end of the month. Venus is going at the end of the month, at the year rather. So there's a rhythm and a cycle. Each planet has its own. We're not gonna get too in depth about like each cycle because of time. But yeah. So the celestial bodies that can and do go beyond this limit includes the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto, and Ceres, Vesta, and Pallas. The ones that do not ever go out of bounds, Sun and Earth, of course, because this is the foundation that's setting the limit to begin with. Saturn never goes out of bounds, which is very amusing, being the planet of like restriction and
Right, just
limits. So
classic,
it's
yeah.
just so fitting. Neptune does not go out of bounds, which is kind of a relief if you ask me, nor does Chiron and Juno, which is also kind of nice. So the fact that Juno doesn't go out of bounds makes a lot of sense for the asteroid
Mm.
of right relations in marriage or whatever it is. I am not an asteroid expert, but I do like to note when they go out of bounds to learn more. So like there's definitely a difference between Venus and Juno though, and that's because Juno never goes out of bounds, but Venus does.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a lot to explore there. So, how to look this stuff up in your own chart. The easiest is with the app AstroGold, but if you don't have that because it's like $20 to $30, that's fine. You can do this for free by going to astroseek.com. So that's astro-seek.com. You're gonna want to, I think you might have to make an account first. But anyways, go to free natal charts, do the birth chart calculator, calculate your chart. And then you're going to want to look at the positions tab, and then you're going to look at the declination column, and it's going to have just a column of numbers. And if you have anything out of bounds, it'll say so with OOB in parentheses. Um, yeah, so you can look for it that way. You can also look to see if you have anything with declination at like 23 degrees, 27 minutes or greater, north or south. You can do this on astro.com, but it won't show you this on mobile. It used to. I'm annoyed, but
That
that's
is
okay.
annoying. I mean, AstroSeek,
Yeah,
though, honestly,
is
like,
the best.
if you're not using AstroSeek, like, go give it a look, check it out.
Yeah.
Peter, who runs the site, is just an absolute angel, and like, it's a
Hmm.
true like passion project for him. Like, I've tried to give him
Yeah.
money before, and he won't take it.
Uh,
So, yeah. But shout outs to AstroSeek.
yeah, he has added tools for declination before, and he added another one today, like literally 5 minutes before I came
Oh
on here. I
wow.
saw the notification that he added another one. So he's literally the best. Astro.com, I have more than one complaint about, but you can use
Yeah.
it, and also they have like the database of all the charts, so I mean that is
Sure.
useful.
Right.
Anyways,
Many
with
tools for many
Astro,
purposes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So with astro.com, the way you're going to look at it is you're going to go pull up your chart, and then you're going to look for a little button at the top of it that says PDF additional tables, and you're going to click on that, and it'll have you download a PDF thing, and it'll show you all the different positions, and you can see the declination column there. This will not have OOB in parentheses, so you'll have to like look at the numbers. So that's another reason why AstroSeek is easier. And then, of course, you can also do this with like professional astrology software such as like SolarFire, Kepler, yada yada. So just make sure you are not looking at zodiacal longitude. So we're not looking at like 23 degrees Gemini or Sagittarius. You're going to look for the numbers that say N or S for north or south. Because we're not measuring from the ecliptic, is a different set of numbers. So that is like the number one thing that will trip people up is like confusing the two. So just
Mm.
make sure you're looking for the numbers that say like north or south. So now we can get into the out of bounds condition and some out of bounds chart examples. So some keywords to remember for out of bounds bodies in general is they tend to take on an extraordinary, unusual, extreme kind of nature. They exceed expectations. They tend to be very energized. A lot of them can manifest as like an overachiever kind of vibe. Oak is an astrologer that you all absolutely need to look into because they have their own astrology school and they have their own webinar on out of bounds planets and racial justice, which is just
Ooh.
fantastic. So Oak has described out of bounds planets as being resistant to intervention, and oh my God, yes, like that is very, very accurate from what I have seen and like what I have personally experienced.
Mm.
Because they're just like they're beyond the reach of the big boss of the solar system, so they're just not concerned with the rules. They're answering to completely different rules. So trying to get out of bounds planets to like behave or be normal just doesn't really work. So that's kind of like where that resistant to intervention comes in. And they're just like super weird, honestly. If I could describe the out of bounds condition in 2 words, it would probably be chaotic neutral.
Mm.
So it's not a good thing, it's not a bad thing, it really is just neutral. So you could get a wide range of people and experiences with these planets. But these are kind of the words that are some keywords that like kind of like narrow it down. So let's talk about the out of bounds moon. So this is the most important one. If you're only going to be looking into one out of bounds celestial body, it's going to be the moon, because it's right there. So the moon has a cycle where it'll go out of bounds regularly for about a decade, and then for a decade it will not go out of bounds at all, and it'll just keep repeating that. So usually you're going to find an out of bounds moon in either Gemini, Cancer, Sagittarius, or Capricorn. And that's because these are the solstice and solstice bordering signs. So it's
Mm.
already at higher declination. So it's a lot easier for it to go out of bounds there. And so it's just much more common to find them there. You can find the moon out of bounds in the fixed signs, Taurus, Leo, Aquarius, and Scorpio. Not as common, but you definitely will find it there. The moon will never be out of bounds in Aries, Virgo, Libra, or Pisces, and that's because these are the equinoctial signs, so they are, really close to the celestial equator, only have a declination of about 0 to 10 degrees, really. So that's why the moon's never going out of bounds there. Natally, it's important. And also progressed out of bounds planets are also very important. That's
Mm.
beyond the scope of today's presentation, but I'll probably do one at some point on it. So, the moon began its most recent 10-year period where it goes out of bounds March 2020. It's a really interesting date.
Dun dun
Um,
dun. Yeah.
just like ridiculous to me. So, anyways, its peak where it was going to be going out of bounds for like the longest amount of time is going to be like 2024 through 2026. So this is not like a new thing. The last
Mm-hmm.
time the moon was going out of bounds a whole lot was between 2005 and 2007, 1987 to 1989, the late 60s. So if you're
Mm.
interested in history and planetary cycles, I definitely recommend looking into the moon's out of bounds cycle because it is very interesting. So here's another one of those declination graphs again. We can see the sun's declination through the year, and now we also see the moon. So the moon is going through the zodiac a lot faster, so that's why we have a whole lot more zigzag lines, because the sun is only going through the zodiac once. So we just have like the one hump there, whereas the moon is doing it many more times. So that's why I didn't include the moon's declination in the previous graph, because it would have just been chaos. Anyways, this is the year 2020. So we can see here that the moon's declination at the beginning of the year was not going out of bounds. It was staying within this limit. But then in March, it starts to peak into this gray area. And ever since then, every single time it goes out of bounds, so roughly twice a month, whenever it's going to be near the solstice signs, Gemini, Cancer, uh, Capricorn, Sagittarius, it's going to be out of bounds. And it's going to be out for a little bit longer each time. So you can see, like, starting
Mm.
in March, it was only out of bounds for like a few hours. But then by the end of the year, it was out for like a couple days at a time. So this is just a thing that happens. The last time the moon started going out of bounds prior to this was 2001. 1982, 1964. And then after it wraps up this decade of going out of bounds about twice a month until 2030, then the next time will be towards the end of 2038. So, significations of the moon in general has to do with like containment, nourishment, nurturing, which makes a lot of sense for the body that like stabilizes our seasons. So security and safety, the emotional nature, liminality, the body, and subconscious. So when we have the out of bounds moon, you get these significations, but a little weirder, a little bit more extreme. So I have, like, if you look into out of bounds planets, most of the information is on the moon. So I have kind of narrowed it down to like three main points here for what I see most often with out of bounds moon people. And one is an excessive drive for security, manifesting as overachievement. Just like never feeling that safety has been actually achieved, just like constantly reaching for it. An extreme or unusual response to one's environment, or significant relationships with women, lunar people, or the mother, for better or worse. Um, so the out of bounds condition is chaotic neutral. It's not good, it's not bad. You get a wide range of things. It's usually just going to be manifesting in a weird way, and weird can be good. It could also be difficult. That's just kind of the nature of life, though. So here's some chart examples now. Huzzah! So here's Neil Armstrong's chart. So I love this one because it's super literal. So here we have Neil Armstrong's moon when he was born was at 25 degrees Sagittarius along the ecliptic. So now if we pop over to this column here, we see that his moon has a declination of 27 degrees south of the celestial equator and 39 arc minutes. So the maximum ecliptic limit is 23 degrees. So his moon being at 27 is way farther out there. So Neil Armstrong, of course, the first human to walk on the moon, and he has an out of bounds moon. And to me, that is just like super duper literal. So his moon is also angular. It's like right opposite his ascendant, really, by a whole sign aspect at least. Sagittarius is the sign of just like far reaching, and it doesn't get much more extraordinarily far reaching than going to the moon and like literally walking on it. So this is just a super literal example. And actually, if you look at the charts for all of the people who have been on the moon, a lot of them have an out of bounds planet. Not all of them have an out of bounds moon. But if you count a progressed out of bounds planet, it's like 11 of 12 of them. It's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. So here's another example of an out of bounds moon person with a totally different vibe. So here we have a moon in Cancer. So the moon is in domicile. It's very comfy, but it's not angular. It's in the 12th house here. So this is a chart for an artist and psychic researcher known as Ingo Swann. So Ingo's moon was at 18 degrees Cancer in the tropical zodiac along the ecliptic, and by declination, his moon was 25 degrees north of the celestial equator. So that puts it out of bounds as well. So his moon being out of bounds in the 12th house of things hidden and behind the scenes and conjunct Pluto, the planet of like total transformation and like power, makes a lot of sense to me for someone who was a psychic researcher who is involved with developing the controlled remote viewing program and psychic spying for like decades. It just
Wow.
makes so much sense here. He's also an artist, and his art is like super trippy too. His
Oh.
whole deal was just like exploring the subconscious and psychic abilities and like developing them into a system, which you could see from that Virgo sun there too.
Mm.
He was also a gay astrologer, just like me. So,
Yay.
so I had to include that one.
I was gonna say, yeah, some
Um,
representation.
yeah. So let's move on to Mercury now. Mercury out of bounds is super fun. So Mercury, we get transaction, transmission, communication, dexterity, wit, multiples, translation. So out of bounds Mercury tend to find either people who are like remarkably talented with words. So you'll find a lot of songwriters here. We're going to look at the chart of one of them shortly. You get people with very like no holds back with expressing their ideas and opinions really. I've also seen it a lot with people who have like a really unique way of communicating, either excessively or never at all, or being like really good at mimicry. Like I've seen people with out of bounds Mercury who hate speaking, but if they're allowed to like type, they're great and they can just like go all out with it, but like they don't like to speak. So like that sort of thing. There's a lot of fun stuff there. So the first chart example I have for out of bounds Mercury is Jean-Michel Basquiat. He's an artist, which you should definitely look up his art. He's a genius. This is a brilliant, brilliant person. Like, look him up. So Jean-Michel also has a 12th house moon, actually. So, oh, actually, no. We have Sorry, this is a noon chart. I don't think we have the time, but that's okay. We don't necessarily need the time to see if something was out of bounds or not. Especially Mercury because it was out of bounds here. So Mercury in the tropical zodiac we have at 22 degrees Sagittarius. And by declination, it's at 23 degrees south, 57. So it was out of bounds all day. We know that. We don't need to know what time he was born. Knowing the date is enough to know that that Mercury was definitely out of bounds. So Jean-Michel was described as having an unbelievable mind as a child. He announced to his father that he was going to be famous one day, and then eventually he showed up at his house in a limo at 7 a.m. and was like, "Yeah, I made it." So like when he was in high school, he didn't do that great because like there was just no containing this mind really. He had to just like do his own thing. And the SAMO is for same old shit. So you can kind of see that like Mercury and Sagittarius was just like doing whatever you want with words. And also just like his art is just remarkable too. So I highly recommend looking this person up. He's also got an out of bounds Mars too. So another one we have is Bob Dylan. This is one of my favorite teachable charts because it just makes like so much sense. So Bob Dylan, a Gemini, of course, but there's more to it than that. Bob Dylan isn't just any Gemini. So his Mercury is out of bounds. We see it is at 23 degrees Gemini in the tropical zodiac along the ecliptic, and its distance from the celestial equator is 25 degrees north of it. So his Mercury is definitely out of bounds. And we can absolutely see an exaggerated, exceptional, remarkable manifestation of all of these Mercury significations because Bob Dylan contains multitudes, as he says, many albums, all sorts of instruments. He does all sorts of art forms too, several wives, kids, books, etc. And then, of course, there is the never-ending tour. So that's not just any Gemini we're talking. So another thing about his Mercury is that literally everything in his chart answers to it. So it's called his final dispositor. So that just like his entire being essentially focuses in on this remarkable planet of communication and storytelling, and I just think it's super obvious actually. So let us move on now to Venus out of bounds. So Venus, the planet of relating, romancing, attraction, values, valuables, pleasure, partnerships, and beauty. When we have an out of bounds Venus, we tend to find relationships that are perceived as unusual, quote unquote, or non-traditional by one society or family. You can see this as like age gaps in relationships, people who are polyamorous, people who just do not want to be in a relationship at all, or people who want to be in all the relationships all the time. So like the thing that kind of like unites it is just like the whole unusual or like non-traditional. Um, Out of bounds Venus people, that this can also manifest as like a very strong and unyielding adherence to one's values or an extreme relationship with pleasure and money. You'll find a lot of people like Miuccia Prada and David Koch that have like out of bounds Venus. People with like a
Mm.
lot of money sometimes will have that too. So, also in artists as well. So I have one example for an out of bounds Venus, and it's the ShamWow guy. So Vince Offer is like an infomercial guy, basically. That's what he's famous for. And Venus is his only out of bounds planet. So we don't know what time he was born, so I just used a sunrise chart here. But that's okay because we know that Venus, having a declination of 27 degrees north, way beyond the max ecliptic limit, that has been out of bounds for several weeks before he was born and probably after too. So it doesn't matter what time he was born. This man definitely has an out of bounds Venus. So he is a Taurus sun, Mercury, and Jupiter too. So all of that is answering to this out of bounds planet of money and values and stuff. And as a kid, he was completely fascinated by Crazy Eddie commercials and then eventually grew up to be an infomercial salesman and comedian. So you can see this really nifty, like, mutual reception between Mercury being in a Venusian sign and then Venus being in Mercury's sign. And his whole deal was like talking about like products and selling stuff. So just fascinating. Mars out of bounds is another one to look up. There's a good amount of stuff out there about out of bounds Mars, especially Tony Howard. He has been on a few different podcasts, I think, talking about out of bounds Mars, and I have links to this on my page. So, anyways, Mars, the planet of assertion, drive, aggression, separation, passion, conflict, combustion, inflammation. An out of bounds version of that is what you would think. So, a little bit like more prone to troublesome manifestations, but not always. So it can be an extreme or unusual expression of anger or aggression, or this could also look like a highlighted emphasis on impulse control because Mars wants to like act, and if there's a lot of energy towards acting, there could be just like a lot more need to be like aware of that and like rein that a little bit. This could also manifest as people who are just like exceptionally motivated, especially toward like protecting the underdog and things like that. It could also show up as a significant relationship to like conflict or pain or things like that. So Frida Kahlo is one of my chart examples here because she has a very out of bounds Mars. So for Frida Kahlo, her Mars was at 13 degrees Capricorn in the tropical zodiac along the ecliptic. But by declination, 27 degrees south, 59 minutes of the celestial equator. So that is almost 5 degrees beyond the maximum limit. So that is a very out of bounds Mars. So Mars in Frida's chart is quite notable because it's like exactly opposite her sun. So like her core identity, essentially. It's exalted, so it's strengthened even more there. And the way this manifested for Frida was that she was in a freak bus accident that dramatically altered the course of her life. She wanted to be a physician, I'm pretty sure, but after this accident, she was bedridden and just like dealt with pain and illness for like her whole entire life. So you can see that like Mars in the house of health, right opposite her sun, and like this had a lot to do with like who she was,
Mm-hmm.
honestly. So Diego, her husband, described her art as having an unusual energy of expression, precise delineation of character, and true severity, which sounds a whole lot like an out of bounds Mars in Capricorn. So another example of an out of bounds Mars person is Aleister Crowley, who I'm not a fan of personally, but it's a teachable chart, so I'm going to teach you about it. So Aleister Crowley also has Mars and Capricorn in the sixth house too, but it's not like perfectly opposite his sun. And there's a different midheaven here. So Crowley's Mars was at 22 degrees Capricorn with declination of 24 degrees south. So definitely out of bounds. So for Crowley's chart, this Mars is the ruler of his ninth house midheaven, which is very striking to me and kind of like one of the most obvious things about his chart, in my opinion. So the midheaven has to do with one's reputation. The ninth whole sign house has to do with spirituality, higher learning, foreign travels. And having his midheaven in this position being ruled by an out of bounds Mars gives us the wickedest man in the world, who is also a mountain climber. So you can kind of see like both of those things in that Mars. So
Mm-hmm.
that's Crowley.
Well, that's one of the
Now
things
let's,
that we talk about in astrology, right? Is that each planet can signify so many different things in your life.
yeah, yeah. So like with Mars, it's not always going to be like wanting to start fights with people. It could also be someone who's really driven to just do their own thing. So, like, sometimes it can just be as neutral as newness as well.
Mm.
So Jupiter out of bounds. So Jupiter in general, we've got significations of like understanding, synthesis, increase, abundance, theology, luck expansion law, and things like that. So out of bounds Jupiter, there's nearly nothing written about it. So if you have an out of bounds Jupiter, I highly recommend you write about your experiences because the astrology world needs you. So this quote here is from K.T. Bower's book Declination, The Other Dimension. And basically all she says about it is that out of bounds Jupiter frequently brings typical Jupiterian luck and blessings and beauty, but the native is often somewhat spoiled by all this good fortune. So Jupiter was out of bounds most recently between February and March of 2002. Prior to that, between March, April of 1990, also in 84, 72. So it tends to go out of bounds with a cycle of like every 6 or 11 years, and sometimes it's as much as 53-year gaps.
Wow.
And that's what we're in right now. So it's not going out of bounds again until 2055. So that's another reason why there's not a whole lot written about it, because you tend to get like huge gaps of people who just will not have it. And prior to 1972, I think the last time it was out of bounds was in like 1909 or something like that. So I have only one example for out of bounds Jupiter because it's kind of hard to find people. I have a couple. So Emma Watson, who's known probably most famously for Harry Potter. I'm not a J.K. Rowling fan. Let's just get that out of the way, just in case. But Emma Watson is not J.K. Rowling, so we're going to talk about Emma Watson's chart because she has a very interestingly placed Jupiter. So for her, Jupiter was at 4 degrees Cancer of tropical zodiac. So this is the sign of Jupiter's exaltation, so it's already in a significant place here. But popping over to declination, we see that it's at 23 degrees north, 28. So just a minute beyond the limit, like a minute or two beyond the limits here. So it's not like drastically out of bounds like Mars can get, but it's still definitely exceptional and wild and interesting.
Right.
So like for Emma Watson, one of the most obvious ways I can see this is like her extraordinarily enthusiastic fan base because Jupiter is in the 11th house of friends, fans, and allies. And then another manifestation you can see with an out of bounds exceptional planet of like higher education could be like Hogwarts, the role that she had as a kid in the Harry Potter films. So that had a lot to do with like far travel and spirituality and things like that too. So it's really interesting to see how sometimes out of bounds planets can be showing up like in a role that you play,
Mm.
like in a movie and things like that. It's so interesting to me. So let's talk a little bit about Uranus out of bounds. So Uranus is the planet of sudden insight, shocking revelation, upheaval. I've seen it related to astrology, electricity, invention, and the internet. So also, not a whole lot written about Out of Bounds Uranus. These two quotes are from Katie Boer's book, Declination, The Other Dimension. So she describes it as typically related to remarkable changes that may take place in life, or an inventive, innovative nature with a tendency toward eccentricity, an impersonal, ruthless attitude, and is frequently found in the charts of assassins. So one person that comes to mind that I didn't include the chart for is, oh my God, I forgot his name, but if you've ever seen the show Fringe, um, the guy who liked the Twizzlers a lot, oh my God, I can't remember his name either, but the mad scientist guy, he has a natal out of bounds Uranus, and you could absolutely see that in the role that he played in this show. So if you want to get in a feel for out of bounds Uranus and energy, watch Fringe. I quite like it. So, the chart I have for Out of Bounds Uranus is not a person, it is an event, and it is the formation of the
Oh,
CIA.
wow.
So, we don't have the exact time. I got the date from their website, and I just gave us a sunrise chart. I personally think sunrise charts are very valuable if you don't like have an exact time. But regardless of the time, we see that Uranus is the only out of bounds planet in this chart here, with declination of 23 degrees, 31 minutes. So a bit above the max ecliptic limit, but definitely out of bounds. So Uranus in this chart is square to the sun, regardless of the time of day. But if you give it a sunrise chart, suddenly that one out of bounds planet is right on the midheaven. So the CIA has been known for being involved in all sorts of hilarity, involving psychic spying too, actually. So you can see that Saturn Pluto in the 12th house of this sunrise chart. But I just think it's
Mm.
very, very interesting to find the one out of bounds planet here is on the midheaven of the sunrise chart. And if you disregard the sunrise chart and just use noon chart, it's still like almost perfectly square to the sun. That's not nothing.
Yeah, and of course they're a
So,
Virgo. I mean, if anybody's gonna get to the bottom of something.
yeah, yeah. Another reason I like the sunrise chart for it is because you have the Mercury Neptune in the house of like values too, which is very
Mm.
interesting. So like hidden money, hidden communication, stuff like that. All sorts of cool stuff in this chart. So let's move on now to Pluto. So Pluto, the planet of regeneration, transformation, obsession, power, treachery, plutocracies, the underworld. It's a more generational planet, much like Uranus. So, unless it's like on a personal planet or on an angle or something, it may not be like super duper apparent. Um, but like in general, Katie Boer describes Out of Bounds Pluto as having an unforgiving nature, and its cycle is reflected in its behavioral influence. So once embarked on a bizarre course, there will be no turning back from the inevitable destination. So the last time Pluto went out of bounds was in Leo from about 1939 to the early 50s. So a lot of boomers have an out of bounds Pluto in Leo, which I think is really interesting as well. So the next time Pluto goes out of bounds will be in Aquarius in 2025 through 2035. Not 100% of the time, like it's going to go in and out a little bit. Um, but yeah, so that'll be a really interesting time for Pluto and Leo people. So my one chart example here is for Bernie Madoff. So he has one out of bounds planet, and it is Pluto. We do have a timed chart for him. You can find it on astro.com. I think someone like got his birth certificate too, which is fantastic. So Bernie Madoff is famous for running the largest Ponzi scheme in history. I am not knowledgeable enough to explain all the ins and outs of a Ponzi scheme, but basically he screwed a whole lot of people out of a whole lot of money. He was also at one point the chairman of NASDAQ stock exchange, which is interesting. So Bernie Madoff's Pluto is at 27 degrees Cancer in the 12th house. And by declination, his Pluto is out of bounds at 23 degrees north of the celestial equator, 33 minutes. So, this is just okay. The reason I am really interested in this chart is because this out of bounds Pluto in the 12th house in a sign relating to the family really gets activated in his life in December of 2008 when Pluto was at 0 degrees Capricorn. So just starting to activate that whole sign opposition. And what happened then was his kids turned min. So
Wow.
Pluto, treachery in the house of self-undoing in a family-ruled sign, activated by that Pluto transit, and then suddenly it all came crashing down. This chart, if you work with fixed stars, is a fantastic Algol chart too. The fixed star of like beheading, quote unquote.
Mm.
So like he has all of this in Taurus here, that also got activated because like Pluto being in Cancer means it's answering to the moon, which is in here in Taurus with all of this cluster on Algol. So just fascinating chart here. So that's pretty much it. If you want to look into out of bounds planets yourself, these are kind of like the foundational texts for it. Declination, The Other Dimension by Katie Boer. Beyond the Solstice by Declination is fantastic, and it basically elaborates and expands on this book here and talks pretty much entirely about like a lot more information on the cycles of each planet. There's a whole lot of tables with dates for each time Jupiter went out of bounds for like the last like 500 years. There's a lot of good stuff in it. I've only ever found it on a site called Scribd or Scribed, probably Scribed. Um, yeah. Declination by Katie Boer, that one's easier to find. Other astrologers to look into would be Charles Jane. He wrote a book on parallels. I have not found that yet. I will at some point. Astrid Fallon, Yelena Lamotte. They are two astrologers in France and Belgium, I think, and they work with us a lot. They've got some ISAR videos that are fantastic. Stephen Forrest and Tony Howard. They're you're gonna find a lot more of their work easily. Mark Cullen, and then also Oak. So go if you go to weirdastrology.com, one of the pinned posts is a resource page for learning more about declination in astrology, as well as the Astronomical Foundation. There's like 35 different sources. Like everyone that I have mentioned previously, as far as like Katie Boer, Lee Weston, Oak, all their stuff is in there. So just go there. Um, and if you want to stay up to date with like different classes and stuff that I'm doing on this, best way is to sign up for my newsletter here. Because I am working on a yearly declination report, which is basically going to be
Ooh.
like a year ahead, what's going out of bounds when, what dates to really keep an eye on, what's it going to be like, and all that stuff. And I'm also working on and have been working on basically this presentation, but greatly expanded into like a large course, which will be coming out eventually.
That's
So that's
exciting.
it. That's all.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Any
Um,
questions?
I mean, I'm just like digesting this. Like, it's so. Because I'm thinking now about some of the folks that I know with certain planets out of bounds, and just thinking about, people's charts that I've looked at already so many times, and that I've
Mhm.
gotten, certain amounts of information from. But now being able to take this, like, declination into account and looking at that, how that really modifies those expressions, of those planets, I think
Mhm.
I don't see a lot of people, I think, really talking about this and applying it. And so, like, yeah, I hope people, like, take, like, a little torch from this and, like, that you go out and, like, somebody out there, like, this is going to spark for you. And, like, I hope
Yeah.
that you let that grow and share it because, as you were saying, like, you know, we need more of your experiences. Like,
Mhm.
we as astrologers are, in debt to people who, have these stories to share. Like, so, if I can help facilitate this for anybody, like, if you know me, if you're, somebody who follows me, whatever, like, if I can, I'm always happy to, like, help you look this stuff up, like, if there's, point you to resources, like, I really want people to find the little things that spark that kind of chain reaction,
Mm-hmm.
and clearly this like really hit for you, like, and then it's just taken off into this like amazing, like expertise that you have.
Yeah, because sometimes if you're only looking at the out of bounds planets in a chart, you can see so much. Sometimes if someone has like one out of bounds planet in their natal chart, that might be like the planet to look at. They
Yeah.
are very loud, very so weird.
uh,
Yeah, and well, I had something that I was gonna say, I don't remember. Oh yeah, like if anyone needs help, I am happy to talk to you and like help you as well. Like I literally do not get tired of talking about this stuff. So if you follow me on Twitter and you have a question, like send me the question. I'm happy to answer it. If you don't follow me, I probably will not see the notification. So that's
yeah, I was gonna say, so
but yeah.
go give them a follow.
Yeah, you can also email me, uh, or whatever. Yeah. But I love talking to people with out of bounds planets. And also, like, if you have like an out of bounds Mars or whatever, and you write about your experiences on a blog, I will link it on my resource page. Like, so feel free.
Right,
If
because
you
it's
don't
like
have a
that
blog, I
personal
can put it on my
experience.
site. Yeah.
Yeah, like that, firsthand accounts. I mean, that,
Mhm.
I always say in an astrology session, like, you are the authority on your own life and how
Mhm.
these things manifest in your life. Like, I'm just
Mhm.
here as like a facilitator, translator, interpreter, companion or whatever. Like, that's the point of an astrologer is to, help
Mhm.
you to learn, more about yourself, by applying the knowledge that you already have about yourself. You're the authority on your own
Mhm.
life,
Mhm.
you know.
When I have out of bounds planets, I have out of bounds moon, which is my chart ruler, and that out of bounds moon is conjunct out of bounds Uranus.
Oh, wow. So that's so
And
like on point for like an
and they're both
astrologer.
opposite out of bounds Cheries.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's probably why I felt so like, oh my God, I feel seen with this stuff. Because it's like my life, my entire life.
Yeah. Like that's intense. Like I think the only planet that I have out well, body that I have out of bounds is Ceres, but like, I'm thinking about this now in the context of like, it's on my midheaven and I already knew it was, conjunct the degree of my mother's son because like that's been a big part
Okay.
of our story, but she has like out of bounds moon. So,
Okay.
which is like just there within a couple of degrees as well. I think she has moon at like 19 Cancer and sun at like 28 Cancer. And then I have this like out of bound series and she's got an out of bound moon. So it's like there's definitely like this adds
Totally.
another layer to our like
Hmm.
mother child kind of relationship for sure. And like her
Hmm.
relationship with her mother, which now I'm going to have to go check her chart and see if she had any out of bounds planets, you know?
Yeah, looking at this from like a family ancestry perspective is also interesting because you'll definitely see like this repeat through the generations as well. It's really
Yeah.
interesting to see like where you get the out of bounds planet from and the relationship you have like with that parent versus the one that you don't get it from kind of thing. There's a lot to
Mm.
learn. Very interesting.
Like that shared weirdness,
Yeah.
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 Um,
So, like
yeah.
my mother, for example, I have an out of bounds moon. She doesn't have an out of bounds moon natally, but she's also
Mm.
kind of weird in her own way because she's a software developer. And
Okay.
like when she was getting into computers, it was not really like that's not really what they wanted women to be doing, but she was like, screw you. I love this stuff and I'm just gonna do it. She's also the kind of person who one day after she was riding her bike to work a couple weeks was like, I know, I'm gonna ride my bike from Florida to Boston. And then she just did when she's like in her mid 30s. Like, I would never do that.
She just like up and
So,
decided and was like, yeah, you know what? Like, I mean, but I really
yeah.
admire that about people, and I think that that's one of these things that is so like cool about, these examples that you brought up, like people just really just doing kind of the most version of that, of that
Hmm.
planet, just in this
Hmm.
really like extraordinary way. So, yeah, well, I mean, I've got two volunteers who've offered to share their experiences with Out of Bounds planets.
Hmm.
So I know Horatio, I see you in chat over there. If you have any reflections on your Out of Bounds Mars and Moon, um, feel free to share them. I can pull up your chart and we can discuss that. But we have Zombiepaper in here on voice, who folks may know as the co host of the Semi Interactive podcast, which is currently on a bit of a hiatus while we both deal with some stuff. Yeah, Zombiepaper, if you want to hop on in.
Hello, this is Zombiepaper, and thanks for letting me jump in.
Yeah,
Hello.
absolutely.
I really related to a lot of what you're talking about with the out of bounds um, idea. I don't know if it's like a bias about, these are frankly incredible and extraordinary people. Like I'm very fond of Pasqua as artist, so finding examples of folks like this, like you look at like the top echelon of folks, but it's like, yeah, I can relate with this. Everything you said about when you were covering my side of the chart was like, oh yeah, that's me.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, like, so you're the thing that really like hit for me when I was looking over these slides before we got started was talking about that significant relationship to pain.
Hmm.
Because you have Mars in Capricorn, which is at, let me see, let me pull up. So that is at a declination of 28 degrees and yeah,
That's out there.
2840. Yeah, so it's
Very out
really
there.
out there. And ruling, your chart is Scorpio rising. And I know that
Oh,
that
okay.
this journey as dealing with a lot of chronic pain over the last year, I know has been a big part of your life.
Yeah, it's been something. It's been an interesting journey for me. So I'm disabled. I became disabled. Funnily enough, there was the date of like March of 2020, which everyone had
Hmm.
experienced COVID, but I had about a month between being sent home. We were all sent home due to COVID, and then experiencing my disability, which is lower back pain, tailbone pain, and that manifesting, progressing from there. It was like I to be clear, I'm rather rudimentary and not well educated with astrology, but when I talk with Belle about astrology, it's always like, how, what, these sorts of moments that it's like, okay, Bella, did you like did you find the hidden notes that I've kept
Yeah.
secret? Like,
Hmm.
no, okay, then there's something to this.
Yeah. I know the feeling. I still experience that even like a decade into this, so
It's just really fun though. That's a thing that it's like for me when I hear about astrology and like it's like being seen of like I myself feel like I'm a like I've been called radical a few times, and I think of that as like, why would I be boring? Why would I live a normie
hmm.
life? Why not do something with my life? And that's led me in my
Hmm.
path here, and being able to I have to overcome my chronic pain as much as I can. Um, and that's led me into being very, I would almost say iconoclastic of like, I need to do this. I need to make sure that I balance myself. I need to take care of myself and I can't sacrifice myself, but I just got to get up here and do this. And that's led me in, as Bella read my chart in one of the first podcasts I did. And then we did together. It was very much, it was like, wow, there's a lot going on here that it, it was very cool. So yeah, when I was listening for the everything related, kind of like in my signs and my kind of perspective, and then everyone else is like, I could see, I can relate with this, I can understand this.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah. It's and it's been really cool. Being able to show that and use that as a tool for understanding, because I know that we sat and looked at your Mars cycles at one point, the Mars transits that you were having in relation to some of those chronic pain events that you were having. So now having this extra context of knowing, the out of bounds nature of this Mars, I think, is really helpful and really illustrative.
Yeah, especially being a Scorpio rising, because that means Mars is like your planet.
Mm-hmm.
So, especially significant, like especially apparent.
Yeah.
I just say that it's been a wild ride for me throughout my life. It's been weird, it's been fun, and it's something that it's like, if it keeps going in the direction I think it's gonna go, and if I just keep on working at it, I think I'll succeed. And it just there's the physical pain, but then there's also the pain of like aching for a goal, and that's the
Mm.
kind
Hmm.
of pain that I feel innately if I'm not working towards something. But then I also have to remember, it's okay to rest too.
Yeah, yeah, because Mars in Capricorn, it wants to react to like all the things, and it's very like dutiful and very much like wanting to climb the mountain, so to speak. So, yeah, there's definitely a balance required because sometimes an out of bounds Mars in Capricorn could just want to like go exhaust itself, but it can't always do that.
Yeah, like for example, there's the NaNoWriMo, the
Yeah.
National Novel Writing Month.
Hmm.
So a coworker of mine was like, "Hey, you do a little bit of writing. You write fiction. Why don't you do that? Or have you thought about it?" And I was like, "I have about like 2 weeks. Let's do it." So I did, which interestingly enough really burned me out physically, emotionally, and psychologically. But I got it done, and it was something that really changed my life, and mostly positive ways, some negative. I would not recommend writing. I went for 60,000 words instead of their 50,000 words over the course of a 30-day period. Uh, don't do that if you're working full time.
Gosh. Yeah. And your Mars is in your third house of like communication and stuff, so an extraordinary amount of effort towards like writing makes a lot of sense. That's so fitting.
Yeah, and it,
Yeah.
it kind of happened to be my name fit just well. I picked the name in like 2008, and then about 3 years ago, I was like, Zombiepaper actually works for that. I write about control. I write about elements of how we're being controlled by life and circumstances, and just stuff like that. And it's like,
Huh.
yeah, let's roll with that.
So you did that in 2008 when Pluto, the planet of the underworld, entered Capricorn, which is where your chart ruler Mars is. That's fascinating timing.
Oh, that was with the
Wow.
name, the self
Huh.
name, the novel I wrote just before COVID. So that was what, 2019. That was in
Yeah.
NaNoWriMo 2019. So for clarification, I didn't want to lead you astray there.
To
Hmm.
be fair, though, I mean, that would be. I mean, Pluto's definitely in the late degrees of Capricorn by then, and you do have Mercury at 28. I think it's 28 Cancer, I'm looking at here. So I think that like Mercury Pluto opposition definitely like came into effect. But like I also love there's like, cuz I was going to say like, this is all positive stuff too, as well as that like drive for writing that you have. I think especially with like I just noticed you have like a Palace in Virgo trine to Mars as well there, so that like third house, 11th house stuff just like constantly cranking out all this writing and just being compelled to write and then sharing it so like publicly, because pretty much everything, I mean, you have quite a quantity out there that people can just go and read on your website.
Yeah, betterzombie.com I think has over 3 million words I've published. Uh,
Oh yeah.
it's really honestly I say it like this, that writing for me is like hunger or thirst for everyone else, that it's something that I'm compulsed by it. It's a possession. I say it like that, where I don't have a choice in the matter, and I've been doing that for over 4 years now with very limited interruptions. Only with disability or with extreme circumstances have I been unable to do that, and even then, it's like 300 words compared to like 500 is my minimum.
Yeah. So just
Gotta
like
eat.
Yeah.
it's dedication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's like
And
I've studied everyone that's been successful. Sorry to interrupt you, Bella.
no, go ahead.
So everyone that's been successful in life, they haven't waited until the right moment. They haven't waited until like, oh, I suddenly have the novel that I know everything that's going on. I'm just gonna go write it now at age 50 or whatever. Um, Everyone has gone through the pain of sacrificing a lot of the trivial stuff to get to that point of, okay, I need to write the novel. What am I going to sacrifice to make that happen? Short of your
Mhm.
health, you have to sacrifice a lot of like, I could be watching a new movie. I can't do that. And you kind
Mhm.
of get to the point where you balance that. And that's like the out of bounds stuff. One of my favorite writers is Hunter S. Thompson, who in Hell's Angels wrote about going over the edge, and how the edge is like the place you only know when you've been there. And that is similarly astrologically as with going out of bounds. Like, you only
Mm.
know that you're out of bounds once you're like, oh wow, this is this is happening. All right.
Like I've broken
Yeah.
free of the sun's like supervision and like I can do what I want now. Like it's kind of like, the dog finally getting out of the gate and just being like, where do I go? What do I do? There's all this open space now and I can just do whatever I want.
Yeah. I'm gonna see if I could pull up Hunter S. Thompson's chart actually. I'm curious now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think poignantly when you mentioned like the dog out of the cage, and my childhood puppy Patrick, he broke free from our backyard once, and so he was like, "Oh, I'm free to explore." Then what he did was he just walked around the house and waited at the back gate we let him into, and he's just like, "I want to go back in. I was exploring, but I'm scared."
Yeah, it's like there's too much freedom.
Yeah. So I looked up Hunter S. Thompson's chart. It doesn't look like he has anything out of bounds, but a couple other people that have an out of bounds Mars and Capricorn include Lady Gaga and Walt Disney. So similar, very like go, 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 and just like not
That
gonna like take days
drive
off kind
towards
of
it.
people. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's actually kind of weird, in that like I went to the hospital about a week ago. I was admitted because of some I have a disability that causes paralysis, is what I call it. Just to name it, functional neurological disorder, or FND, or conversion disorder. It The symptoms are kind of like Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis a little bit. And so I was there for like 5 days, and that was like 5 days of like, I can do a little bit of writing on my phone, but it was like all I could really do was just watch a bunch of movies, and it's like, that was the weirdest I felt in a long time of like not myself, but like being a I was not being a participant. I was being like observing, and it wasn't really a fun media consumption experience. I watched some decent movies, but yeah, it was definitely not my. I was out of my element by not being actively doing stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. My out of bounds moon is in Capricorn, so I can relate to that kind of vibe of like just needing to like get the thing done.
Yeah, it's
um,
something that everyone I've really studied about this all kind of think the same way. Like they're going to die with unfinished projects, and having that as an acceptable thing of like you're just always cooking something, and
Totally.
it's
Yeah.
not a fatalistic morbid kind of thing, and just accepting that you're
Mhm.
not going to like just you're not going to write the thing and then be done. It's like, well, I want to write the sequel and I want to have it better.
Yeah, because that out of bounds energy is just extra energized and it needs an outlet, so it's just gonna keep on going.
Yep, it just like I've learned the hard way many times that it's like listen to your body, listen to your mind. If you're feeling a little bit like strung out because you're out of bounds, it's okay to calm down a little bit. It's okay to kind of like downshift and take it easy because you're already operating at a level that's above average. It's okay to
Exactly.
take a break.
Yeah, yeah. Another thing about out of bounds Capricorn planets is they tend to have ridiculously high expectations for themselves that are just completely beyond what anyone else could ever like grapple with too.
yeah,
But like to
Horatio,
us, it
this
doesn't
is what I
seem
would
like that.
say.
To the out of bounds person, it doesn't necessarily like feel like that because it's just normal to us, but like everyone else is like, what the
It's like they're running on like 220-volt or whatever, and like the rest of us are, on like, 110
Yeah.
or 120 or whatever. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
like
was
I
gonna
couldn't
say,
sleep at all last night. That
really,
I was just like thinking about all of this. I feel okay. I mean, I'm probably gonna crash at some point, but like I really
sure,
wanted to sleep, but I was just like my brain was just on.
yeah, yeah,
So, yeah,
I feel that
sometimes it's a little tricky.
I wanted to mention specifically with writing and how as a writer that you have to grapple with perfection of
Mhm.
like I write something, oh, I think that's garbage, let me delete that. So how I've overcome that is I've learned to trust myself in saying, okay, I wrote a paragraph, that's the best I could do. When I write essays, I write about my healthcare experiences. It's like that was the best I could do in the moment. Don't worry about it too much. And when I do fiction, it's a lot more in depth and involved. So you edit multiple times, and you just say, "All right, let me write the first draft. Let me just keep on going until I go back and edit." And then there's where I'm gonna be graceful with myself, but it's also like you can laugh at it a little bit. You can be like, "Ah, I made a typo there, ha ha." Just have that respect for yourself. Very similarly to when I edit for others, it's like I respect the writer and I know my job is to help that writer succeed. And so that's my way of tempering when I might go out of bounds of like, oh hey, I'm writing too much or I'm editing too much. It's like is it serving the story well? If not, nuke it. If it's there but it's clunky, leave it. I'll edit it later. So that's kind
Mhm.
of my piece about writing it because you can't write like what 2-3 million words without having made a bunch of mistakes and just accepting that it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah, and another Mars signification is like removing things and severing things too. It's not the planet of like abundance and like including all of the things. So another way to work with Mars is to like consciously like remove things that don't serve you and things like that. So
Hmm.
hmm
with editing, that makes a lot of sense.
would it be kind of fair to say that Mars would be kind of like the Spartan mindset of kind of bared to the essentials and fighting for the essentials? If we're kind of summarizing Sparta as a very cliche perspective, would that be fair?
Mars is very just like straight to the point and specific and concise kind of thing. It's very no frills. It just wants to do its own thing kind of deal. It's not really. So I guess I don't have enough context for like an understanding of Spartan really.
Oh, no worries.
Um, yeah, sorry.
But
But
No,
like
think
in
like no
general, Mars is
frills in
just
that
like,
sense, yeah.
yeah, no frills. It's not really concerned with things being nice or pretty or beautiful. It just wants to get the point across kind of deal.
Get the job done. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
especially in Capricorn, it's very about like efficiency
Mm-hmm.
and not like waste.
yeah, it's not going to get done if I overthink it, so just do it.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I think is real Mars wisdom. Like I think like one of the ways that you can really connect with Mars is just getting into that spirit of doing. Like instead of being hung up too much sort of mentally sometimes. Like, sometimes
Yes.
it's just you need to get into that Mars of Marsing and just yes, no, taking some kind of an action, but
Yeah.
keeping things moving and not stagnant.
Yeah, Mars is the archetype of like shoot first, think later, or whatever the saying is.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is exactly, but it's something
Yeah,
like
like
that.
like shoot first and like ask questions later or whatever. Yeah. I
Yep,
mean,
It,
it's
but
the
you
do
need
stuff
that.
planet.
Right, yeah.
it's like the Han Solo of astrology, I suppose.
Right, yeah.
hmm
I'm not
hmm
much of a Star Wars fan, but I always think of like the Han and the Greedo thing as like
Mm,
the big kind of pivotal argument and perspective, and I think that that kind of ties in, if you don't mind, with editing and writing stuff like that. I'm helping a friend of mine whose name is Goldspin. He's writing a story called Moon, and a kind of shared community, creative universe where we're hanging out in, and when I do edits, I encourage him to decline my edits. I say, you
hmm
may reject this, but I want you to think about it. I want you to like, here's my proposal, because here's my rationale, and I think that if you reject it, just think about it a little bit, and I'll come back to it, and if I keep on poking this, then maybe there's something to it, but that kind of polite kind of pushing along makes him a better writer because he's challenging himself in that creative space of thinking, can I do this a little bit better, and of course by doing this I'm becoming a better editor myself, and we're doing this back and forth that I'm really fond of, and I want to do more of this in the future of find more writers, and hey, I want to edit, I can edit for you, kind of a thing.
Hell yeah.
yeah, this is all very literal Mars and Cap in the third.
It really is.
Um,
It's fantastic.
right, and so like this is why I'm grateful, Zombiepaper, for you sharing your experience, because this is I it reminds me a lot of like this is what I loved about anthropology. Like that was my major in college. I started out as a biomedical sciences major and then had a really shitty freshman year and I just was like this is not for me. And I picked up anthropology and like that was, this is one of the things that it reminds me of with astrology is just like how fundamental and how important like actual source material is from people's own words and from their own mouths, not some external kind of case study sort of sketch of things. Like you can have as many conversations as you want and try to get these things out, but people need to actually tell their own stories, and then that's where real like knowledge and wisdom comes from. So like, I always say this to like clients and stuff. Anytime that you talk to an astrologer, you are, giving so much to them too. Like, you're receiving a
Mhm.
reading from them, but every opportunity that we get to talk with somebody about their chart is just another extra layer of information that we can add to kind of this human picture, and just see all of these ways that these different planets can manifest. Because, like, so, I picked your chart, and then Horatio's chart is, yeah, you guys were born like a month apart ish. So you both have that Mars out of bounds, but Horatio also has the moon in Capricorn out of bounds as well. And so, and I think Mars direct also. So it's like similar, you've got that Mars similarity there, but then the extra layer of the moon, and just being able to look at, I guess, how these things, like, you can look at it as like these, I don't know, almost like micro generations in a way, or like these little micro groups, is like, who are all of these people, like, who were born in this couple of months with these certain, like, out of bounds configurations. It's like we talk about Pluto
Mhm.
generations and all of that, but like, I love these little tiny groups, of just like a couple of months, and what were the people like that were born in that really specific little crucible, but how do they differ from
Mhm.
each other as well?
Yeah, and also like with out of bounds Uranus, a lot of people
Mm.
born around like 88 to 90-ish will have Uranus out of bounds, but that planet only goes out every like 40-ish, like 42 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a lot. And what Bella was talking about with like it's so important to hear like from regular people because like if you go pull up charts on astro.com, it's mostly going to be like famous people. So there's not a lot of information about, just like regular people like us who have out of bounds planets who are not like, on Time magazine or whatever. So that's why it's just like so important for to just like hear anyone's experience with these planets. And that's like, astrologers study a lot before giving readings, but like our real education is like client work. That's like where all the good stuff is. So,
Yeah. And so, like, if you have out of bounds planets and you want to know more about them and you want to talk to somebody who can help you understand them, Maidlin's your person. Like, please, like, there's so much richness that, like, I bet just happens in those sessions. Like, I'm like, I wish I had, because I just checked, I do have, I'm one of those people with the Uranus, out of bounds in that little segment. But I'm like, man, I wish I had some like personal planets that were like out of bounds, so I could like really sit down and, like, I want to get in on this juice. But so for you folks with those out of bounds planets and out of bounds stories, though, like, you are important. Like, we need to hear from you. We want to hear from you. Like, you
me
will add
especially.
so much. Yeah. Like, so yeah, like, and just, I'm so grateful for people like you that really just take this stuff and just, I don't know, nourish it, curate it, like, keep the fire burning.
I have a very oddball question, but I wonder if this
Yeah.
person has out of bounds charts at all or information at all. I don't know the best term for that, but this is the filmmaker of The Holy Mountain, Alejandro Jodorowsky, who's born in 1929,
Mm.
February 17th. And the reason why I was like kind of thinking of like out of bounds folks of like these as I'm thinking extraordinary folks, the ones that
Mm.
kind of lie outside of the norm for like doing creative stuff like he it's like just like look through like what he's done and just like what the heck.
What year?
1929.
February 17th, 1929. We have an out of bounds Mars and Gemini.
Oh,
Oh, there you go.
There it is. It's opposite Saturn too. That's fun. Huh. All
Wow.
right. Well, I will be looking into this person. Thank you very much.
certainly.
Great. See, and this
That
is what I'm talking about. You share knowledge, and everybody gets enriched. I love this stuff.
yeah. It was just one of these like when especially like Basquiat when you mentioned that it was just like like a light bulb came on my mind because it came on. It was like, yeah, that Basquiat is a perfect example of someone that over the course of his life just completely radically changed arts culture, and it was just like one of these really amazing. You look at some of the pictures and just like you kind of think like, oh, that's kind of weird or kind of dumb, but then you kind of think about it and it's like, no, actually that is really cool, that is really worth studying. And when you
Mhm.
mentioned that, I was thinking of Hieronymus Bosch, who's another one of my favorite artists, who
Yeah.
unfortunately has no birth day but birth year
Yeah.
on listed on Wikipedia. And I was like,
Mhm.
just go look at the Garden of Earthly Delights for an hour. You'll have a great time.
Yeah, yeah, I know I have tried to look up his chart before and has been similarly disappointed by only a year. Sigh.
I thought it was funny when you mentioned earlier there too about the I think it was the Ponzi scheme person having
Yeah.
the birth certificate, and like you're like excited over that. And I was thinking like because I was IT specialist for a dozen years. It's like, oh, information leak kind of stuff, but I know astrologically that's great information. So that was where I was just like in my mind I was like, oh yeah, birth certificate for astrology good, for general security bad.
Well, hopefully it was
Yeah, it's
obtained
not like
through
they have a
legitimate
copy
means,
of
but
Yeah, they don't have a copy of the birth certificate like on Astro Databank. That just means like the astrologer who got his chart was able to like have someone read it over the phone or like see it themselves kind of deal.
uh
Yeah. I don't have his birth certificate.
you're not going to open up any credit cards in his name.
I mean it would be kind of ironic, I suppose.
Right,
To
yeah.
scam the scammer, yeah. Yeah, all right. Well, I, folks, am ready to, I think, start winding this party down. But it has been a
Thank you,
really
Zombie
fun two
Paper, for
hours.
your chart and your experiences. I appreciate it.
Oh, certainly. I'm more than happy to volunteer almost all my relevant information. So when Bella pretty much, I think it was yesterday, was like, "Hey, I'm going to be doing this. You're relevant here. Do you mind?" Like, not only do I not mind, I don't mind joining.
Yeah, and like, thank you for, for contributing to research. And for, I've really appreciated being able to like just share more astrology, and I'm really glad that it seems like you've gotten some stuff out of it. And I hope that everybody else who's watching this now, who's watching this in the future, whenever, like, I hope that this has also like stoked a little fire in you and gotten you interested in this. Because yeah, it just adds this whole extra like really awesome layer, I think, to your chart interpretation and to your understanding of yourself and of other people.
Heck yeah.
So I am going to. So yeah, Maighdlin, where could people find you? Any final comments, wrap ups, anything you want to tell us?
Most of my time and energy goes to my Patreon, so patreon.com/weirdastrology. Um, yeah, I'm gonna be working on doing a lot of like 5 to 10 minute introductory astrological videos, astrology videos. I a lot of my clients and people who interact with my work are new to astrology, so that's why. But I also am working on like the yearly declination report for like astrologers too. So whatever your experience level is, I'll be able to probably teach you something or another. And I like to teach. So come on down.
Right.
Otherwise, you can find me on Twitter at weird_astrology. If you want to learn more about Declination, go to weirdastrology.com. My main website is mmkelly.space, and you can find just like everything from there. Yeah, that's basically it, I think.
Sweet. Yeah, plenty of places to find you and to support your work. Because I always say this is, if you enjoyed, what we presented here today, if you can chip in a couple of bucks, pay Maighdlin for their time, pay your astrologers for their time. We appreciate whatever you can offer, but this is part of keeping the kind of flow of information going. Is energy exchange, if you will.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, so thank you, Maighdlin. Thank you, Zombiepaper. Thank you. Who else hung out? Sinja, thanks for coming. Life Dream Astro, thank you so much for coming and hanging out. Yeah, this was really good. And hello to all of the VOD watchers and YouTube watchers in the future. I hope that things. I hope that things are going well for you. From my perspective here on July 30th, 2022, it's hard to see what the future is going to look like. So, report back, I guess, if you want to. Time travel and let us know. All right, well, I'm going to get a raid set up over here. So, anybody who's over here on Twitch, we're going to head on over to the Curious Worlds and watch them do some crafting. And yeah, I guess that's all I've got for today. So take care, Maighdlin and Zombiepaper. Take care,
Thank you
everybody
so
else.
much.
Thank
Bye
you so
bye.
much. All right, bye,
Thank you
everybody.
very much there too, Bella
Bye
and
bye.
Madeline as well. Take care and
You got it.
hopefully I got the name. Okay, cool. I
Yeah, bye bye.
bye
Bye bye.
bye.